in the moments directly after the event known as the cleansing of the temple. When Jesus had driven out the money changers and overturned the tables, and his disciples were still processing the fury they had just witnessed. There is a fragment preserved in the Gnostic manuscripts where he pulls them aside and tells them something that does not appear in any approved gospel. Something so direct and so practically dangerous to the control system that the institutional church could never allow it to be taught openly. He tells them that most human beings walk through life carrying passengers they never consented to host, that these passengers are not metaphors for bad habits or inner demons in the psychological sense, but actual non-physical entities that attach to human energy fields the way parasites attach to physical bodies, and that these entities, which the Gnostic tradition calls Archons, feed on emotional output. He tells them that the reason he acted with such intensity in the temple was not just anger at corruption, but because he could see the archonic presence saturating that space, feeding on the fear and greed and desperation of the people, and that until humans learn to recognize when they are hosting these attachments, they will continue being drained, manipulated, and steered without ever understanding why their thoughts feel invasive, why their emotions spiral without cause, why they feel exhausted even when they have done nothing, and why no amount of self-improvement ever fully resolves the feeling that something is feeding on them from the inside. And then he gives them 3 signs. 3 specific indicators that reveal when an archonic entity has successfully attached to a person's field. And these signs are not vague spiritual metaphors. They are observable, testable, recognizable patterns that anyone can check for in their own experience right now. Because the Archons are not fairy tales, and they are not ancient myths that no longer apply. They are functioning intelligences operating in frequency bands just outside normal human perception, and they attach to people every single day. Especially to people who are sensitive, spiritually awake. If you have ever felt like your mind is not fully your own, if you have ever noticed thoughts appearing that feel foreign or hostile, if you have ever experienced sudden emotional crashes that make no logical sense, if you have ever felt a heaviness in your chest or pressure around your head that you cannot explain medically, if you have ever had the sensation that something is watching you even when you are alone, then you are not imagining it. You are detecting archonic attachment. The reason this teaching was suppressed is obvious. Because if people understood that intrusive thoughts, emotional spirals, and chronic mental interference are often caused by external entities rather than personal failure, they would stop blaming themselves. They would stop seeking endless therapy for problems that are not psychological but energetic. They would stop believing they are broken, and most dangerously to the control system. The archonic system depends on humans feeling guilty, ashamed, confused, and powerless, because those emotions generate the exact low-frequency output that entities feed on, and if humans learn to identify and remove attachments, the feeding supply would collapse. So the church buried the teaching, turned the concept of demons into theatrical horror, made exorcism a rare dramatic ritual that only priests could perform, and ensured that the average person would never learn the simple, direct methods Jesus actually taught for detecting and expelling these parasites in real time. But the teaching survived in fragments. It survived in the underground streams. It survived in the Gnostic lineages that understood the material world is not neutral, that it is layered with intelligences that exploit human unconsciousness, and that sovereignty requires not faith but awareness, not belief but function, not submission but the ability to close your own doors. Now, here are the 3 signs exactly as the hidden tradition preserved them. And as I describe each one, I want you to check internally, because if even one of these signs is active in your life right now, you are hosting an attachment, and by the end of this teaching, you will know how to remove it without needing a priest, a ritual, or anyone's permission. Because the power to expel archonic presence is not granted by institutions. It is inherent in awakened consciousness. It is inherent in awakened consciousness. The first sign Jesus taught them to recognize is sudden thought insertion. And this is the most common and most misunderstood form of archonic interference, because most people assume that every thought appearing in their mind is their own thought. But the Gnostic teaching is clear that thoughts can be inserted, broadcast, and implanted by external intelligences, and the way you recognize an inserted thought is by its quality, not its content. An inserted thought arrives suddenly, without context. It interrupts whatever you were thinking. It feels intrusive. It often carries a hostile or self-destructive tone, and it repeats in loops. If you have ever been having a normal day and suddenly a thought appears that says you are worthless, and you were not thinking about that topic at all, that is insertion. If you have ever been calm and suddenly a thought appears that triggers panic, rage, or despair for no logical reason, that is insertion. If you have ever noticed the same negative phrase repeating in your mind over and over like a recording, that is insertion. Your own organic thoughts flow naturally. They connect to context. They feel like they emerge from your internal narrative, but inserted thoughts feel like they are dropped into your mind from outside. And the reason they feel that way is because they are. Archonic entities do not have creative intelligence. They cannot generate new ideas, but they can broadcast preformed thought packets into human consciousness. And if the human does not recognize the thought as foreign, if they assume it is their own thought and engage with it, argue with it, believe it, react to it, then the entity has successfully hijacked attention, and hijacked attention is food. This is why Jesus told his disciples to watch their thoughts not as a moral exercise, but as a detection practice, because monitoring your thoughts allows you to notice when something foreign enters. And the moment you notice it, the moment you recognize a thought as inserted rather than organic, it loses power. Because recognition breaks identification, and identification is what gives the thought its grip. If you believe the thought is yours, you will defend it, explain it, spiral with it. If you recognize the thought is inserted, you can dismiss it the way you would dismiss a spam email. This does not require belief in archons. It only requires noticing that some thoughts feel different, and that difference is the signal. Right now, think back over the last 24 hours and ask yourself if there were any thoughts that arrived suddenly, interrupted your flow, felt hostile or intrusive, and repeated without resolution. If the answer is yes, you have experienced insertion, and insertion is the first sign of attachment. The second sign is emotional volatility without external cause, and this one is crucial because the modern world trains people to explain every emotion as a reaction to circumstances. But the Gnostic view is that emotions can be induced, amplified, and harvested by entities that specialize in feeding on specific frequencies. And when an Archon is attached, it will trigger emotional spikes not because something happened in your external life, but because the entity is feeding and needs you to produce more output. If you have ever woken up feeling heavy, anxious, or depressed for absolutely no reason, if you have ever had your mood collapse in seconds without any triggering event, if you have ever felt sudden rage that seems disproportionate to the situation, if you have ever experienced waves of despair that feel like they are being poured into you rather than rising from within you, then you are not emotionally unstable, you are being fed upon. The archonic attachment stimulates your emotional body the way a farmer pokes livestock to get a reaction, and the reaction generates the frequency the entity consumes. This is why people describe feeling drained after emotional spirals. Because they are drained, the energy was harvested, and the spiral was induced specifically to create harvestable output. The key detail Jesus taught is that organic emotions have a cause and a resolution. They rise in response to something real, they process, and they pass. But induced emotions have no clear cause. They feel like they appear out of nowhere. They resist resolution, and they loop. If you sit with an organic sadness, it will move through you and eventually clear. If you sit with an induced sadness, it will not resolve. It will keep regenerating. It will keep finding new reasons to continue, because the entity is sustaining it to continue the feeding cycle. And this is the test. When you feel an intense emotion, pause and ask, is there a real cause for this, or is this being stimulated? If you cannot identify a proportional cause, if the emotion feels like it is being pumped into you, if it loops without resolution, then it is not yours. It is being induced by an attachment, and the attachment is feeding. Right now, scan your recent emotional experience and ask if there have been moments where your mood dropped suddenly without external reason, where you felt invaded by despair or rage or anxiety that did not connect to anything happening in your life. If the answer is yes, that is the second sign, and you are hosting an entity. The third sign is energy drain that does not match your activity level. And this is the sign that confirms attachment because it shows that something is actively consuming your life force beyond what your body naturally uses. If you wake up tired even after a full night of sleep, if you feel exhausted after doing very little, if you need stimulants just to function at a baseline, if you feel like your energy is leaking and you cannot figure out where it is going, if you have that constant sensation of running on empty, no matter how much rest or food or self-care you engage in, then you are not lazy, you are not weak, you are not failing at health. You are being drained by an entity that is siphoning your energy field. And the reason doctors cannot find anything wrong is because the drain is not happening at the physical level. It is happening at the energetic level. And the Gnostic teaching is explicit that archonic entities do not have their own sustainable energy source. They are parasitic. They survive by extracting energy from beings that do have a connection to source. And humans are ideal hosts because humans generate massive amounts of emotional and mental energy, especially when they are kept in states of fear, stress, confusion, and reactivity. The attachment functions like an energetic feeding tube. The entity latches onto your field, usually at the solar plexus, the back of the neck, or the base of the skull, and it draws energy constantly, and the longer it remains attached, the more it drains. And the more it drains, the weaker your field becomes. And the weaker your field becomes, the easier it is for additional entities to attach, which is why some people seem to spiral into chronic fatigue, chronic depression, chronic illness that no intervention fully resolves. Because they are hosting multiple attachments, and the medical system is treating symptoms while right now, assess your energy honestly, not in comparison to other people, but in comparison to what you know your body is capable of. If you feel like you are operating at 30%, 50%, 70% of your natural capacity, and there is no medical explanation, then something is consuming the missing percentage, and that something is the third sign. And if all three signs are present, sudden intrusive thoughts, emotional volatility without cause, and chronic energy drain, then you are absolutely hosting an archonic attachment. And it needs to be removed tonight. Now, here is how to remove it. And this is the part the church never wanted you to know, because it is so simple, so direct, so accessible, that it completely bypasses the need for clergy, ritual, holy water, or institutional permission. The removal method Jesus taught operates on one principle. Archonic entities cannot remain attached to a consciousness that refuses consent, and consent is withdrawn, not through begging, not through pleading, not through fear, but through sovereign command, because command is the language of authority, and authority over your own field is not something you need to earn. It is something you already possess. You have only been trained to forget it. The removal happens in 3 steps: detection, revocation, and sealing, and the entire process takes less than 5 minutes. But it must be done with full presence, clear intent, and absolute conviction, because the entity will try to convince you it is not real. It will try to make you doubt. It will try to insert thoughts that say this is silly, this will not work, there is nothing there, and those thoughts are its defense. Because if it can keep you from trying, it can keep feeding. Step 1 is detection, and you have already done this by identifying the 3 signs. Now you make it conscious. Sit or stand in a quiet space where you will not be interrupted. Close your eyes and bring your attention to your body. Scan slowly from the top of your head down to your feet and notice if there are any areas that feel heavy, cold, tense, or numb. Pay special attention to the solar plexus, the space between your shoulder blades, the back of your neck, and the base of your skull, because those are the most common attachment points. When you find an area that feels off, that feels like it is holding something that does not belong, place your hand over that area and acknowledge it silently. Say internally, "I recognize that there is an entity attached here. This is not my energy. This is not welcome." The acknowledgement is critical because it breaks the camouflage, it exposes the attachment, and exposure is the first stage of removal. Step 2 is revocation, and this is where you withdraw consent. With your hand still on the area where you detected the attachment, speak out loud, and it must be out loud because vocalization carries authority in the energetic field that silent thought does not. Say clearly and firmly, "I revoke all consent for any entity to attach to my field. I withdraw all agreements made consciously or unconsciously. I command any archonic presence attached to me to leave now. You are not welcome. You have no authority here. I am sovereign." As you speak, visualize the entity being pulled off your field like a leech being removed, and see it dissolving, see it losing form, see it being unable to remain in your presence because your command has removed its anchor. Do not beg. Do not ask politely. Do not negotiate. Command. Because command is what works, and the entity must obey a sovereign command from the consciousness it is attached to, because the host holds the ultimate authority. The attachment only functions through unconscious permission, and you are revoking that permission now. Step 3 is sealing, and this is what prevents reattachment. After you have commanded the entity to leave, place both hands over your heart and speak this sealing declaration out loud. "I seal my field with source light. Only truth, love, and divine will may enter here. I am protected by my own sovereignty. No archonic presence may attach without my awareness and conscious refusal." As you speak, visualize your entire energy field surrounded by a boundary of light, not as protection from fear, but as a clear definition of your space, a declaration that this field is yours, and only what you permit may enter. The sealing is not a shield that you maintain with effort. It is a statement of ownership that your field recognizes and enforces automatically once it is declared. Now do this process right now, even if you are not sure there is an attachment, because detection happens through the process. You will feel the difference when something releases. Close your eyes, scan your body, find the area that feels heavy or off. Place your hand there, and acknowledge that something foreign is present. Then speak out loud the revocation. "I revoke all consent. I command any archonic presence to leave now. I am sovereign." Then seal with both hands on your heart. "I seal my field with source light. Only truth may enter. I am protected by my own sovereignty." After you complete the process, sit quietly for 1 minute and notice what changed. Most people report an immediate lightening, a sense that pressure lifted, that the room feels clearer, that their thoughts feel quieter, that their chest feels less constricted. That shift is the attachment releasing. That shift is proof that something was there and is now gone. If you felt a shift, if the heaviness reduced, if your breathing deepened, if the intrusive mental noise decreased, then you successfully removed an attachment, and you now have proof that this teaching is not theory, it is function. And if you did not feel a dramatic shift, it does not mean nothing happened. It means the attachment was subtle, or you need to repeat the process with more conviction. Because sometimes entities cling, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 sessions to fully dislodge them. But persistence works because they cannot remain where they are not permitted, and permission is entirely yours to give or revoke. Now, here is what happens after removal. Because the teaching does not end with expulsion, it includes maintenance, because entities will attempt to reattach, especially in the first few days after removal, because they were feeding on you and they want their supply back. You will notice increased intrusive thoughts trying to convince you that nothing changed, that the attachment is still there, that the process did not work. Recognize those thoughts as the entity trying to re-establish contact from outside your field. Do not engage. Simply repeat the command, I revoke consent, you are not welcome, I am sovereign. You will also notice that your energy begins stabilizing, your mood becomes more consistent, your thoughts feel clearer, and you stop experiencing the random emotional crashes that used to derail your day. That stability is proof that the drain has stopped. To maintain a clear field, repeat the sealing declaration every night before sleep for 2 weeks. Say out loud, I seal my field with source light. No archonic presence may attach. I am sovereign. This nightly reinforcement trains your field to reject attachment automatically. And after 2 weeks, the seal becomes self-sustaining. You will also become sensitive to the early signs of attachment attempts. You will feel the moment an entity tries to latch on, and you can revoke consent immediately before it roots. If this process worked for you, if you felt the shift, if the heaviness lifted, if the intrusive noise decreased, then you have just done something most people never do in an entire lifetime. You have taken sovereignty over your own consciousness. You have refused to be farmed, and you have removed a parasite that was feeding on you without your awareness. And if you want to help others do the same, share this teaching, because the suppression of this knowledge is one of the primary mechanisms that keeps humanity spiritually enslaved, and every person who learns to detect and remove attachments weakens the archonic feeding system, because the system depends on unconsciousness, and you are now conscious, and consciousness is the one thing they cannot control.